I never know where to look with these things. I guess I'll try to look at the camera, but oh well. At any rate, hello viewers. My name is Gibson Del Judas. Googling my name will turn up a checkered internet history owing to way too much computer access as a kid. But among the many hats I now wear, I'm a producer involved in developing major live theatrical and large and small screen projects, a wedding officiant, a singer with a local gospel choir, a prolific blogger, link in the description, and coming soon, the co host of a podcast currently in development called A Good Nightmare Comes So Rarely: The Rise and Fall of Dance of the Vampires. Speaking of that podcast, well, by now it's not news that after years of significant health issues, rock composer Jim Steinman, whose work permeated pop culture the world over and who numbered Dance of the Vampires among his many credits, has passed away. To quote his lyric to an Andrew Lloyd Webber tune for Whistle Down the Wind, there's got to come a time when we've all got to go. You start out always fast, but the ending's always slow. Being someone who, as a Vulture reporter once put it, attempted to broker work with the man, and knew him as a person, my feelings are mixed, to say the least. It was never easy being involved in any capacity with Jim, as another forthcoming podcast, Kitchen Sink Chronicles, will soon report. Sometimes you wanted to hug him, and sometimes, well, anyone who worked with or cared about him knows exactly what I mean, once being grateful for the good times recedes from view. Nothing or no one is merely black or white. Every human being has more than 50 shades of gray. However, his stunningly beautiful music, the best thing about him, enriched society and art in general. One can't deny what he meant to his audience, how he shaped an entire genre and provided the heightened soundtrack to so many people's wasted youth. He injected a Wagnerian device, a flow, into his compositions that was uniquely his. It is my sincere hope that his body of work be forever remembered. It should come as no surprise that one of my favorite items from that body of work is Dance of the Vampires. To be clear, I'm mainly referring to the version which played 9,500 performances in 13 languages in 15 countries to a total audience of almost 10 million people over the past 23 years. But the brief New York run which starred Michael Crawford fascinates me too. After all, it's not every show based on an Oscar winner's early work, with a score by two celebrated songwriters, an adapted book by a critic's darling who authored several popular off-Broadway plays, and a Tony-winning director and star, that bites the big one. I'm not going to lie, one question this podcast at least hopes to answer is, how does a Broadway musical created by such talented, successful people, with seemingly everything going for it, end up like this? This, of course, being a critical and commercial disaster that totally eclipsed Carrie in financial loss, set a new bar for legendary flops, at least until Spider-Man came along, and is still widely cited as proof of the so-called wisdom that vampire musicals don't work on Broadway. But despite the show's notorious reputation, Nightmare will be as much a retrospective and what might have changed the outcome kind of story as anything else, going all the way back to the original Roman Polanski source film and following the show's full path from Vienna 1997 to today. Indeed, what struck me after years of studying both the European and American versions was how similar they actually were, considering their reputation for being so different. Naturally, we hope to include insider stories from anyone connected with the show, be it overseas or Broadway. If you saw or heard it, were in it, worked for it, liked it, hated it, whether you were cast, crew, or creator, please don't feel uncomfortable. We want to hear from you. If that describes you, comment below or contact us on social media. We're at Garlic Gothic on Twitter. I'm sure I'll live to regret this, but our DMs are open and we respond to most tweets. Ideally, nobody is going to be blamed or cast in a nasty light by any of the stories told about the Broadway production. There'll be no pointing of fingers, no heroes or villains. Those who were involved are all really lovely and talented people. There have been few more talented groups of artists, honestly. We're not asking them to dish dirt, spill tea, or hurt anyone, just to relate what was, as it was. If egos occasionally got in the way or heartbreaking personal circumstances intervened, they all still banded together, put adversities aside, and crossed the finish line, the New York critics be damned. In the grand scheme, nobody failed forever, or even failed significantly, except maybe the investors, but part of their charm is that they can often lose buckets of cash, take the L that rich people call a tax write-off, go back to the billiards table of theater and say, rack 'em up, let's play again. Further, our audience will hear all kinds of things they may never have heard before, such as an in-depth exploration of the many versions of script and score, including a breakdown of just where all the recycled material, spoken and sung, had its origin. A friend of Jim's once joked that his entire catalog is one 200-hour-long song with lots of movements, and Vampires, in all its versions, illustrates that perhaps the best of any of his work. They may hear a rare demo of the duet version of Total Eclipse of the Heart, featuring the late Laurie Beechman, among other early materials used to shape the show in its many renditions. They'll hear tapes of music rehearsals from New York. They'll hear and hear about songs intended for the Broadway version that didn't make the final cut, including the fascinating story of what happens when a frustrated composer is asked to write a comic number for Transylvanian peasants who have adjusted to their miserable lot. And they'll hear the tales of those affected by it, including myself, as the author of part of a Wikipedia entry and a full Tumblr case study and primary source for a major Vulture article. Hi, Helen. Those affected by it, like my co-host, like fans and detractors of all backgrounds who watched from the sidelines, and in particular, a theater kid from Rochester, who decided the Broadway version could not be the final word on the show, and staged a more faithful variant on the European take on the sly 4 times, eventually founding a highly regarded youth arts program in the process. The audience could even learn the story behind a long-rumored New English version more faithful to the German original, parts of which may have debuted on this channel before. Jim Steinman once said, "I've been called over the top." How silly. If you don't go over the top, you can't see what's on the other side. Well, I can think of no better tribute to his memory than to go over the top and dive deep into the story behind what was both one of his biggest successes and one of his highest profile missteps. 20 years on, now more than ever, it's time to re-examine the case of Dance of the Vampires. So, tune in to the podcast in the days ahead and come along for the ride. After all, like the song says, a good nightmare comes so rarely.